So what we got here is Crystal Serum Light and EXO version 4. And you don't have to be a professional to have access to these coatings. Anybody can buy them. You don't have to be accredited or anything. And it's basically a 2-layer process. This is your first, like your base coat, Crystal Serum Light. This is the one that offers you most of the protection, the easy cleaning abilities, that kind of stuff. And then the EXO is like a top coat you put over top. And that one is the super hydrophobic one, gives you your crazy water behavior, and it adds a little bit of gloss. It's got a bit of a darkening agent in it as well. So those are the coatings we're going with today. I noticed a lot of the other videos on here are all sponsored videos from those cheap Chinese coating companies. And I'm not gonna lie, they reached out to me too, but we don't use that cheap junk on this channel. Oddly enough, this stuff is a little bit cheaper than those supposed DIY ceramic coatings. Anyways, so we got Gtechniq's panel white here. You want to wipe it down, make sure that the surface is nice and clean. Get any polishing oils off before you put the coatings on. And this is the applicator that comes with the actual coatings. There's one in each box. It's just kind of, you stick your fingers in there, wipe it on, you know. I've tried them, and I actually prefer to go with the CarPro suede block with these suede applicators. I find it uses less product that way, and it goes on more evenly. But that's just a matter of personal preference. There's nothing wrong with the ones that Gtechniq sends you. I just prefer to use those. You can use either one. So this is the setup I got going on here. We're going to put these coatings onto this 2019 Harley Davidson Road Glide CVO bike too. This is the best of the best, the top of the line. Step one, we got to get this thing washed up. And if ever there was a good time to do like a really thorough cleaning, this is going to be it. When you're dealing with these ceramic coatings, they can be pretty finicky if you've got anything left over on the surface. So you want to make sure you do probably the most thorough cleaning you've ever done on your vehicle. And then I'm going to follow it up with a quick clay bar. This is a brand new bike, and I'm not too concerned with contamination like I would be with a brand new car, because of not because it's new and hasn't been ridden, but because of the way that these things are shipped. They're actually basically they leave the factory in a sealed crate. Unlike a car that sees a lot of rail dust when they're brand new, these bikes actually are typically pretty good. I'm going to double check just to make sure, but I'll just do a real quick clay bar. This is also a good time if you guys are into the iron and fallout removers and the tire removers, all that kind of crap. If you want to go for it with all of that stuff, to make sure you want to have this thing surgically clean before you apply any coatings. Okay, the bike is cleaned and decontaminated. Now step 2 is going to be to examine the condition of the paint and then perfect the paint, because whatever we lock in under the coating is going to be locked in under the coating, obviously. Now, being a new bike and having only sat on the showroom floor for like a day or something like that, it doesn't really have any real major scratches or anything, just some minor swirl marks here and there. Another reason that we want to at least do a one-step correction on this is not just for removing scratches and defects, but also for the cleaning abilities of it. There's just no way to be 100% certain that there's no waxes or sealants or anything left on the paint until you at least run a machine polisher on it. Products like panel wipe and eraser, stuff like that, they're good for kind of worn out waxes and sealants that have already diminished on their own and just need a little bit extra to be removed. But as for like a freshly applied sealant, something like a panel wipe isn't necessarily going to get it off completely. They're really good for removing polishing oils after you polish, before you coat. That's what they're originally designed for. There seems to be some confusion about those kind of products. So that's what they're actually good for. But we're going to run at least a one-step polish on this to clear up any minor imperfections and make sure that we are 100% down to bare paint before we ceramic coat it. Now, just based on experience, I'm assuming that I'll be able to get away with doing 205 and a foam pad, just a light finishing polish to clear up this paint. And I think that'll probably be the case, but you don't know for sure until you start working on it and do a test spot. So the paint will always tell you what it needs. But before I do that, there's not a whole lot of investigation to do on this vehicle, because I mean, it's a brand new bike. It just pretty much left the dealership. It's been ridden maybe a couple of times. But there's There's one area of concern that I shouldn't say it's really an area of concern, but there's one thing that caught my attention. But on the rear fender here, we have minor holograms, which tells me somebody's been here with a rotary buffer, either at the factory or probably not at the dealership, because like I said, it wasn't even there long enough. Now, is this just a matter of, as you can see, like this kind of bolt right here, that's the mounting point, and these rails are the mounting point for the passenger rear seat. So I don't know if the factory finishes down the paint with a rotary as part of the normal process, and then they refine the rest of the bike, because the rest of it doesn't have any holograms anywhere. So did they skip the refinement step because the passenger seat normally goes here and they just kind of got lazy, I guess? Or did somebody drop something on this while it was being built in the factory and they actually did a spot repair at the factory before it even went outside for the first time? I don't know. So without overcomplicating it, what I'm getting at here is that I see signs of a rotary polisher that do not match the entire rest of the bike. So I'm going to get a couple of quick paint readings here. I just want to make sure that whoever has been here first left me some clear coat to work with, just for added safety. I think we'll be okay. So I'm going to do my test spot on this part of the front fairing here first. 2 reasons. It seems to have the worst swirl marks out of anywhere else on the bike. So if I know that my process will get these out, I know that I can repeat it and the entire bike will be good. And also it's the highest part of the bike. It's easy to light up, it's easy to see, easy to work on, so I can really focus on what kind of level of correction we're getting. Yeah, as you can see, we've got some swirl marks here, as well as over here. If you're going to be doing coatings or paint correction or anything, one thing that's really important is your lighting. You can't fix what you can't see. And a lot of times a paint job will look flawless in like indoor lighting, like these garage lights, because they're not a sharp spotlight like the sun, right? And you really need to get a really bright spotlight onto the paint at an angle in order to see everything, because otherwise you're going to think it's perfect, pull it outside into the sunlight, it's going to look like crap. Okay, test spot, let's go. Okay, so as you saw there, 205 and a foam pad, just a refinement polish with a polishing pad, is just what the doctor ordered. And you can see it cleared those swirl marks up in that pretty bad area for swirl marks. That was about the worst spot on the entire bike. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock out the rear end of this bike first, partly because I'm curious about those holograms. I just checked the readings and did confirm the paint is thinner there. So A, it's a good thing I checked. B, that tells me that I'm leaning towards a minor bit of damage that was fixed at the factory before this bike left. Not a big deal. It's actually probably more common than you think. Happens with a lot of new cars. Things happen in the factory, you know. You never know. Somebody trips, bumps something in their hand up against the fender or something. Doesn't take much to scratch a paint job. So as far as polishing, we've got the rear fender here, all these little intricate areas. We've got the side cases. These need to be polished. Gas tank. The rest of the fairing up front here. And these CVO road glides actually have like an extended fairing that runs down right around the oil cooler. Front fender. And all of this gloss black, and on this side of the fairing needs to be polished up as well. just because that's what you see as you're riding down the highway and the sun is on it directly. And if you've got an eye for the detail, that's going to drive you nuts if that's not perfect. So. Alright, now the paint's corrected, so it's time to apply the coating. This is fairly straightforward. You just got to wipe it on, obviously with no pressure. You want to make sure you got good even coverage across everything. In this case, I'm going to do the top section of the fairing all at once. The whole idea is to break the bike or car or whatever down into sections as you work. These Gtechniq coatings are pretty forgiving, so I would do at least a quarter of a car hood at once, maybe even a half. It all depends on the heat and humidity that you're working in for how quickly you're going to have to remove it. Now, as far as cure time goes, I don't know if this is going to show up on camera or not. But you'll see some streaks there when you first put it on. And if you watch really carefully, really closely, you'll see the streaks will turn into kind of straight lines of dots. So once it goes from straight solid streaks to straight lines of dots, that's the best time to wipe it off, I've found. And you can see that's about ready to go. Now, I like to use 3 towels to wipe it all off. And this is personal preference again, but your first one here, you're basically kind of smearing the coating around and kind of helping to level it down again. And then you're going to switch to your second towel, and this will be this will do the majority of the removal. And then I do a third towel after this as your follow-up, just to ensure that you got no high spots left over, because once they're dried and cured on there, they're on there. Okay, we've got crystal serum light on the entire bike. I also did on top of the fairing here just because that's really soft and easy to scratch. Thought that might help that out a little bit. So, I'm going to take a little break and give this a little bit of time to cure. In general, you want to give it at least an hour before you do the layer of EXO over top. Sometimes different professionals will recommend that you do crystal serum light and then leave it like even overnight, and then the next day do your layer of EXO then, but I want to get this one finished up tonight. Depending on how long it took you to put on the first coat, you might be at an hour by the time you're done. So if you start where you started the first time, you can kind of hot lap it. Now when you do your layer of EXO, it goes on the exact same way that crystal serum light went on, and depending on conditions, it might be a little bit more of a pain to wipe it off because it wants to kind of spread as opposed to just wiping off. It kind of wants to smear sometimes. I'm working on some pretty serious humidity today, so we'll see how that goes. Here you can actually see the crystal serum light doing its job and rejecting the EXO layer. It kind of looks like water beating up almost, but that gives you an idea of the chemical resistance of the coating. In this case, the coating doesn't know that we actually want that chemical on top, so that's kind of cool to see. This characteristic is going to get stronger as the coating fully cures too. So for right now, it's not going to be much of a problem for applying the EXO layer, it just looks cool. Now depending on the conditions you're working in, EXO can be a bit tougher to apply compared to crystal serum light. But that just means you have to work it in a bit more and cycle through lots of towels. A good rule of thumb is if you did 2 passes when you were applying crystal serum light, then you probably want to do about double that when you apply EXO and just really rub it in. At least that's what I've experienced working in the Ontario humidity here. So just keep on wiping away until it's all gone. Make sure you got good lighting. Make sure you go through lots of towels if you need to, and it'll all come off. It just might take longer than it did with crystal serum light. Not really much of a before and after on this one since it's a brand new bike. Honestly, actually most of the footage in this video is all after shots. But this bike's got a good layer of protection on it now. One of the biggest advantages to the ceramic coating is, in this case, it's much easier to clean. Bikes like this tend to spend a lot of time on the highway, which usually means you're going to have a lot of bugs to deal with. So a coating makes them come off a lot easier, and less scrubbing means less scratching. But as you can see, this thing looks amazing in the direct sunlight now. And the cool thing is that you can actually park it next to another brand new CVO Road Glide with the same paint job, and this one would look noticeably better right beside it. And that's just because the factory doesn't put the time and effort into pulling the last bit of gloss and clarity out of the paint. Now, with that said, the paint jobs on these CVO bikes are really well done. Actually, in my experience, even the paint on regular Harley Davidsons is high quality and it always responds really well to polishing. But paint and chrome have always been things that Harley does well. Anyways, this Road Glide is done and ready to rack up the miles and looks seriously good while doing it. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any other questions about something I didn't mention in this video, then feel free to put them in the comments below. I always try to answer the questions on here as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you on the next one.